morning. My name is Murray. Welcome here. Exciting day to have the baptism today, so that's always encouraging. On my right, your left is Dean. He's going to be preaching in ASL for the deaf community, even as I attempt my best attempt at walking through this journey that we're just beginning, a whole new series, because we're starting something new here for over the summer. It's a warm, fuzzy book called Ecclesiastes. So it's going to be fun to find Ecclesiastes. You're going to kind of turn to the very middle of your Bible. Kind of if you can find the Psalms, then you'll turn to the right and you'll see Proverbs and then Ecclesiastes. So if you want to be able to find that, that'll be helpful. Typically, we do go through books of the Bible here at Grace so that we can actually see what God reveals about himself, who he is, what he's done, what is ultimate reality. And so we want to be able to see it in its context as it unfolds in the story of God in the Bible for us. This way, too, that we can't avoid topics that we might like to kind of maybe not deal with or have to talk about. It also means we can't just simply proof text our favorite ideas or hobby horses that we want to get on. So the plan is we're going to spend the summer in Ecclesiastes. And now this is certainly a book you could proof text a lot of crazy things if you wanted to in this. And so we want to be able to see them, though, in their context and in the unfolding story of God so that we actually see what God intends in the big picture with this book and other books as we walk through them. So Ecclesiastes is kind of like the crazy uncle in the canon of Scripture. He's sort of like that uncle that no one wants to sit with at the family reunion because he's a little drunk and he smells bad and he's prone to rant and tell these long, depressing stories. And what we want to do, we just want to toss the football around, maybe eat a few burgers, catch up with the cousins, and here comes uncle, right? Glaring at you, a little tipsy, he's very cynical, and he's telling you that life is meaningless and then you're going to die. That's kind of the book of Ecclesiastes in a nutshell. Right? And I know you're thinking, can't we do Summer and Psalms again? Ecclesiastes makes people nervous. And even a couple of the early church fathers wanted to see it removed from the Bible. And that's because it says things like, you're happier when you drink a lot of wine and eat good food. And Ecclesiastes is going to mess with us, especially if you're a religious person. Because this book is raw. It says stuff like being poor sucks. And for some of you, it would have been better if you had never been born. That's going to be in this book. And it seems to contradict itself. When we get to chapter 10, we're going to see it says that money is the answer to all your problems. And then in another chapter, it says money will never satisfy. Huh? This is, kind of confusing, and I think if some could have voted Ecclesiastes off the island, they would have. Ecclesiastes has all these raw, messy, and at times as you look at it, it's seemingly contradictory statements. But I think that's kind of like real life. I mean, think about it. If you're a parent, think about your kids, right? They're so cute one day, and the next you're checking their scalp to see if 666 is tattooed there, right? And that baby, right? And, babies, I just get to be a grandpa again, so that's incredible. And so, but you can look at that baby or take your baby and you just go, oh, so cute. Oh, my little sweetie, and then, oh, Henry, she smiled. I don't think it was gas. I think she really smiled. And you're so beautiful. And I just love your little fingers, your little toes, and that little button nose of yours. I love you more than anything. And then just a few hours later at 3 a.m. Why won't you shut up? What's wrong with you? How did we get this demon baby? Right? And then you've got all kinds of really dark thoughts about your spouse who's still sleeping. This is real life, right? This is real life, right? Where you have, this is life under the sun. In fact, this is you. You're a living contradiction. But here's what's crazy. As dark as this book can be, and as raw as it is, the Holy Spirit inspired this book according to Jesus. And it's really beneficial for us. God actually reveals himself to us in this book, and one way that he does it is by showing what we are apart from him, so that we can actually see just how much we need him. So you might think, well, what can a 3,000-year-old book have to say to us today? And how can it possibly be relevant? Well, in the words of the author of Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. So I think we'll find that this book actually has a lot to say to us in our present time, because people are seeking significance, looking for meaning, beauty, satisfaction, asking, what is life all about? What's it all mean? And Ecclesiastes is going to be about those kinds of questions. There's common sayings maybe you've heard, right? Like, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Well, that's from Ecclesiastes, right? Or there's a season for everything, right? Or everything in its time. That's from this book. The Birds, they wrote a song about Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. It's called Turn, Turn, Turn. Of course, most of you don't know who the Birds are, so you're thinking it's not relevant anymore. But then go to chapter 12. Here's one for you students. It says, much study is just wearisome of the flesh. Right? So why study? Now you got your Bible verse. Make it your life verse, right? And you were thinking it wasn't relevant to your current situation. So I think as we approach this book, you have to get ready to be uncomfortable for the next 2 months. In fact, it's going to feel like driving in the UK. So this at least today will help Courtney prepare, right, for driving on the left side of the road. You have to concentrate a little more. You have to focus. So here's our opening chapter, then Ecclesiastes chapter 1.
Reading from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 1 to 18. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes, and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south, and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, "See, this is new"? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of latter things yet to be among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, and a striving after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after the wind, for in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow.
So verse 1, he starts out this whole book by saying, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So this is the words of the preacher, the teacher, because he's reached the end of his life and he actually wants to teach us something now. So this is Solomon. He is the son of King David. And here's a man who's been on the throne of a very prosperous and wealthy, powerful nation. He's highly educated. He grew up with the best teachers money could buy. He has more wealth, power, and fame than we'll ever see. And as he looks back over his life, now he's going to teach us by getting us to think, and he's going to ask some questions. And he's not going to give maybe a lot of answers, but his questions are actually going to force us to think critically, and he's going to bring up some stuff that we can want to just leave kind of buried, things we really don't want to think about maybe. And that's kind of why we live in a world of ongoing entertainment, and that's really behind today's alcohol and drug epidemic, because we don't want to think about or face reality. Now, Solomon here, at the end of his life, he's now repentant. He looks back at how foolishly he tried to live much of his life without God at the center. And so this book examines that quest. It examines his experience of a life lived under the sun without God. And in verse 2, he calls it all vanity. Right? That's his verdict. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Now, vanity actually is the Hebrew word hevel. And it's often translated meaningless if you've got a different version, the ESV, or emptiness. And so here's his uplifting introduction to his book. It's all vanity. Meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. And I think they translated vanity because it's easier to say vanity of vanities than meaningless of meaninglessnesses. But really, Solomon? Is it all meaningless? Everything? Yeah, that's what he says. Everything under the sun. Talk about a bleak spoiler right off the bat. So he's going to use that word, that Hebrew word hevel, a lot. In fact, it's used 38 times in just these 12 chapters in this book. So why is everything meaningless? Why is enough never enough? Why do all the things in this world that promise satisfaction never seem to keep their promise? So the word hevel literally means a puff of smoke or vapor. It just doesn't have any lasting substance. You can see it. It looks fairly attractive there for a moment, but you just can't get a hold of it. You can't really grab it. It just doesn't have anything solid. It's like your breath in the winter, right? It's just there for a moment. You get this pleasure for a moment, and then it just vanishes, right? Or it's like my bank account or my wallet, right? I put money in it and then just hevel. It's just like vapor. It vanishes. It doesn't last. But we think, man, if I had everything that Solomon had, if I had all he had, I'd be so happy. I'd be so satisfied. And I just look at him and I go, why are you so bummed out? I mean, are you sure you don't just need a hug? Because look at everything you have. But no, Solomon says he wants to teach us something that he's actually put to the test. And verse 3, he goes on to say, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Now, toil is not our career, but rather it's referring to all our effort that we do to carve out some meaning in life. And people ask all the time, how was your week? And often what we hear is busy, right? We're so busy, but for what? For what? There's no gain, he says. And that word gain has the idea of a net profit. It's what net profit do you have after everything? What's left over after everything, all the expenses and everything's tabulated? So after your whole life of toil, what ultimate gain, what net profit do you have? What do you actually have to show for all your toil? And he says, nothing lasting is the implied answer. So what endures to lasting satisfaction, right? We basically leave this earth with nothing unchanged. He says in verse 4, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. So the earth, it's just like this, it's like an exercise bike, right? You got generations come out of the womb, they jump on the bike, they pedal like mad till eventually they die, they fall off, and then the next generation gets on and says, well, we'll pedal harder. Life is like a big treadmill, right? You run, you sweat, but when all is said and done, you didn't actually get anywhere. You're still in the same spot. You were supposed to reign over the earth, I thought. But the tree looks at you and goes, I don't even have a brain, and I'll outlive you. The rock says, I'll be here long after you're gone. For all your noble, idealistic thoughts, you're like a snowman. You're just here for a season. Spring comes, gone, hevel. Each generation comes thinking, we'll change the world. But a generation goes, another one comes, and nothing ultimately changes. In verse 5, he says, the sun rises, the sun goes down, hastens to the place where it rises. In other words, it's just like, from our perspective, under the sun, it's just like the sun's going around in circles. And then he says, the wind blows to the south, goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind. And on its circuits, the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea's not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. It's like you've been to Niagara Falls. I mean, wow, the amount of water that just pours over the edge there. And the water just pours and pours, and it heads out to the sea, but the sea never fills up. And the water, it just keeps coming. It just keeps coming. It keeps coming, keeps pouring into the sea, but there's no net gain. No net gain. It's like the sun, the wind, the water. Everything just goes around and around. I mean, it's moving, but it's not getting anywhere. So think of your life. You start off sort of helpless, eating soft foods, mumbling to yourself, wearing a diaper, having no teeth. And pretty much that's where you end up as well. It's hevel, a vapor, vanity, meaningless, depressing, frustrating. It's a curse. No matter what you try to accomplish, right? You do up the laundry, you fold it, you put it away, you turn around, what do you see? Dirty clothes, right? More laundry. Right? Another meal needs to be prepared. Come on, you just ate yesterday, right? Why is everybody asking, what's for supper again? Sink full of dirty dishes again. Mopping that dirty floor again. How'd it get so dirty already, right? Didn't I just cut the lawn, right? Didn't I just shave? And my week looks a lot like last week. Our lives are more like the movie Groundhog Day than we care to admit. And there are people who like to pretend their lives aren't in a rut. So they create a Facebook or Instagram persona. Look at all the wonderful things I eat. Look at all the wonderful things I do, right? I have this great variety of selfies just to show that my life is fantastic and amazing and exciting. Buy the latest gadget, just anything to try to get out of this predictable rut that we call our lives. Verse 8, he says, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Right? The eye is never satisfied. Advertisers count on that. Right? Nor is the ear. We always want more. So we try to divert ourselves, right, from the meaninglessness of life with endless entertainment, right? Netflix, reality TV, and yet we still end up bored. But wait, there's a new episode coming out. Weariness, he says. I like this. I don't know if you saw this, got this in the 2014 CFL football game, the Grey Cup. And the Calgary Stampeders, couldn't happen to a better team, okay, were there. They won the Grey Cup game in 2014, and then they hoisted the fruit of all their labors, the dreams of their lifetime, and they hoisted that Grey Cup up in the air, and what happened? It broke. broke apart in their hands. Hevel, right? Vapor. It doesn't last. And some dream, well, if only I was married. Then, if only we had children. But then, if only I had that house. If only I had that bigger house. And then, if only I had that little bit bigger house. It's just discontentment. Never fully satisfied. It's hevel. It's kind of like chasing bubbles in the backyard, right? All exciting, and then you finally catch one, you grab it, and it's just pop. As all you're left with is a sticky hand, right? Just disappears. He says in verse 9, he continues, what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there's nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it said, see, this is new? It's already been in the ages before us. There's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things to be among those who come after. So time is an issue in what makes things hevel, because time always gets the last word. Nothing lasts. See, time says whatever you build, doesn't matter whether you build a business, a family, art, culture, scientific learnings, it's all just a sandcastle against the waves of time. It won't matter whether you were ever on the planet, because it'll all be gone. So what's the point, right? You're not going to make the world a better place. Your life is insignificant. You won't be remembered in the grand scheme of things, as verse 11 said. You won't be remembered by those who come after you. I mean, if I go back to Lease School, where I taught for many years, right? I've only been gone for 6 years. But already, when I go back there, most of the teachers don't know who I am, right? There's been a change of staff, and almost all the students have no knowledge of the popular Mr. M who coached the teams, right, and poured himself into his students. It's as if I never taught there at all, except for maybe the few old team photographs that they got stuck in a closet, I found out, right? So that's only after 6 years. What are they going to say of my existence after 4,000 years? Time says you're getting closer to death every day. Death is one of the great obstacles to have a life full of meaning. And that's why your toil is meaningless, because death is ever encroaching. In chapter 3, the teacher's going to say this in verse 18. He says, I said in my heart with regard to the children of man, that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is hevel. Vanity. All go to one place, all are from the dust, and to dust all return. So death is the great equalizer. It takes the wise, it takes the fool. It takes the rich, it takes the poor. And just like the animals, just like the beasts, we turn into dust and fertilize the plants, he says. So you've got lying side by side are the dead body of Albert Einstein and a cat. One could play Mozart and figure out quantum physics. And the other just played with a yarn ball and fantasized about ripping innocent children's faces off. But they're both the same now. Just decomposing corpses, dust. And does love even matter? Because that dies too. And does learning matter? It'll be forgotten in the grave. Beauty fades, it's fleeting. Death makes life hevel, a vapor, here today, gone tomorrow. And another thing the preacher says that makes life meaningless is that it just all seems so random. It's just all chance. I mean, you work hard, and sometimes it's the slacker that gets the promotion. and the cheater wins. Like in chapter 9, he's going to say, some fish are caught in the net, others escape to live another day. It's just chance. There's no rhyme or reason to it all. Be a good parent. Your kids could go astray. Ecclesiastes seems to focus a lot on, give us all the exceptions to the rule in a broken and sin-filled world. Early to bed, early to rise, probably won't make any difference at all. Evil people prosper. Good people suffer. And then we die. What's that character in Winnie the Pooh? Eeyore, yeah. Can't you just hear that in his voice? You should read Ecclesiastes with Eeyore's voice, I think. You know? And if it's all chance, if it's just all random, why even try? And if there's no God, and we're just one big cosmic accident anyway, which means our life is insignificant and has no real meaning. And he goes on in verses 12 to 18 of chapter 1 that we had read. You can see how as king over Israel, he then just applied himself to learn. Higher education. He was going to get more and more educated, so he acquired more knowledge, more wisdom than all his contemporaries, he says in verse 16. And then in living contradiction, he also went out in madness and folly. He says in verse 17. Now, I don't know what that was for sure. I don't know if he snorted things up his nose or just wasted hours foolishly. But it's clear he worked hard, he studied hard, and he partied hard. And we live in a generation, when you think about it, we have knowledge at our fingertips. Curious about something? Just Google it. I didn't have to use my fingertips, right? I can just say, Alexa, right? Why are there tides? You know, why does water expand when it freezes? And yet, though our generation has more knowledge at our fingertips than ever before, we're still just the same bunch of sinners who die just with more technology. Solomon, he's got money, position, power, friends, women, wealth, wisdom. He pursues honor. He takes his life, he pursues social services, making the world a better place. He's trying to figure out meaning and happiness and satisfaction in everything under the sun, everything that people point to, everything that people look to for meaning. And he says it's just chasing the wind. You'll never catch it. In verse 15, he sought meaning in finding a great cause to live for. Right? Seeing what was crooked in society and trying to straighten it out. Seeing what was lacking and trying to fix that need. So living for some great cause so that he could rise above the mundane. But in the end, he says, it's all hevel, meaningless. And if you solve one problem, there's another one waiting in the queue to step in line. So he's going to show us the result of living for money and for pleasure and for entertainment and for sex and living for education, for wisdom and learning, and the result of pursuing foolishness and madness. Solomon gets to experience all those things, and he doesn't just get to taste it, but actually to fully experience everything that people say that's what you need to experience the good life. And people think to themselves all the time, well, if I just had more money, if I just had more pleasure, more success, then I would be really happy. And Solomon says, I've been there. Trust me on this one. I did everything the rich and famous do, and it was all meaningless. And remember, he had far more wealth comparatively than Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Mark Zuckerberg combined. He says, I've experienced everything you're wanting. And then he says, I shifted gears. I stopped the busyness. I relaxed. I took early retirement. I got down to earth. I stripped down, back to nature, living organically, just making it all about me and my friends, all about relationships. And that too was Hevel. It couldn't be held on to. See, we think if I had everything he had, I'd be happy. But he wasn't. So we need to think about that. Come on, Murray. I thought church was supposed to be a happy place, right? Now I don't even feel like going into work tomorrow. Good thing it's a day off for most of you, right? Welcome to church, right? Everything stinks. Everything is broken. And it's been this way since Genesis chapter 3. This is the result of sin. Sin is finding your self-worth, your satisfaction in anything other than God. It's making a good thing to be a God thing. It's making good things, good gifts, to be ultimate things. And verse 18 tells us, at the very end of that first chapter, he says, the more knowledge you have, the more grief you will have. I guess that's why the expression comes in, ignorance is bliss. Right? The more you know about life, the more you actually see, the more nauseated you get about life in this world under the sun. We can start to get the impression this book is actually a manual of how to become an atheist, or a manual for becoming depressed. Right? It's written by Debbie Downer, illustrated by Negative Nancy. But there is a clue in the phrase, under the sun. Under the sun. This is a picture of life. When you try to find ultimate meaning, ultimate satisfaction in things created under the sun. So this is actually what's describing is the life of an atheist. It's actually a life without God. Is this all there is? Because if it is, then this is meaningless. If there isn't something beyond the sun to give greater meaning, if there isn't something to deal with the onward march of time, if there isn't something over the sun, then it's all Hevel. It's just chasing the wind. If there's not something over the sun that's orchestrating things, giving ultimate meaning, and that things are not actually random and just mere chance, but there's actually design and grace. And here's what Ecclesiastes does so well. It actually frames the question that the rest of the Bible answers. Ecclesiastes is the contrast that actually helps us appreciate and see the wonder of God coming into our dilemma, into our broken, meaningless world. The Hevel of Ecclesiastes is the great contrast, the alternative to a life with Jesus. It pictures for us life apart from God. And this is why we need Ecclesiastes. Because life is either one of despair or the greatest news ever. Secularists see a world with no ultimate real purpose. The world of the atheist, that's what's being portrayed in this book. Ecclesiastes is the answer to the one who declares, I don't believe in Jesus, I believe in science. No wonder we're the most depressed, medicated people in the history of the world. Because they haven't asked the question, what is the end of man? Why are we here? And to have an answer to that question, where death is not the last word, where chance is not ultimate reality, where time will not lay waste to everything that you've loved and built. See, there is no answer for our ultimate desires under the sun, but there is one who's over the sun, who is the ultimate Son of God himself, who enters into time and space and defeats death itself. And doesn't it, against the contrast, the news appears very bright and very good. So Ecclesiastes, it leads us to Jesus. Ecclesiastes is the whole creation groaning like it's pictured in Romans chapter 8, groaning for redemption from the curse of Genesis 3 that's found in Jesus alone. He came from above the sun, and he entered into life here under the sun. And Jesus bore the curse of the futility of our toiling. And then he said this, take my yoke upon me. Right? Learn from me, for my yoke is easy, my burden is light, and find Sabbath rest for your souls. Oh, Jesus, the eternal creator, took on flesh, entered our time and space as a human. He sweat. He felt his body age. He felt his body in pain and agony, and he tasted death for you and for me. And I love in Matthew 12, when Jesus entered life here under the sun, it says, a greater than Solomon is here. Solomon knew the problem, but he couldn't fix it. He knew that the world was filled with sin, right? But he couldn't forgive that sin. He couldn't cleanse his own stain of sin. He knew that people were crooked, but he couldn't straighten them out. But Jesus could. Jesus came to right everything that Adam wronged and to answer all the frustrations that Solomon articulated. Because he's God, Jesus did not just come to inform us, but to transform us, not just to share in our sorrow and grief, but actually to die for our sin and rise in victory over it. Creator and creation reconciled. That's good. Jesus stood beneath the sun with us. And he said, take heart, I have overcome the world. What good news. Jesus brought something new under the sun. A new way, a new creation, a new covenant, a new king who has come, and that changes everything. Because Jesus intervened, we actually now have hope that the things under the sun can be enjoyed. And once you recognize that that's not the source of our life or meaning, once you recognize that those things are not our Savior, then our loves actually get reordered again. Our loves get ordered rightly, where we love God supremely. Ecclesiastes is telling us, don't miss the big E on the eye chart. It's Jesus. Meaning is found in him. Knowing and loving him because we're known and loved by him. You'll never be satisfied until you meet him. And until you're reconnected to him, in whom is fullness of joy. At his right hand are pleasures forevermore. Pleasures that are not hevel. Joy that is not hevel, but actually increases forever. In a world full of grave plots, there's one grave that's empty. And there is one man whom the dust cannot claim, because God would not allow his Holy One to see decay. Jesus is free from the curse. And he graciously offers that freedom to you. So cry out to him in confession that you've tried to find meaning in something or someone other than him. And then find your meaning in him alone. Well, that's it. That's our introduction to this book, Ecclesiastes. So he's just introduced it. Now he wants to sort of lay it out and show us all the things that he has learned under the sun. And my hope is that we would love and appreciate Jesus all the more against the backdrop of the reality that this book presents to us. What life under the sun without Jesus at its center would be. But because of Jesus, it's not. It's not all hevel because of who he is.